Hello and welcome to the video. My name is Ingvar Johansson. I'm the captain of the Icelandic women's team and I'm currently situated in Chennai in India. And we're going to look at some games from the fourth round, some interesting games, some interesting tactics and some interesting moments. I hope you enjoy it. This is what I noticed from the fourth round, an exciting fourth round which had a lot of exciting results and upsets. Which we'll mention a few of them, but we'll try to focus on some games. And I'm going to start with a game between Fabiano Caruana, the United States Board 1, and he's playing against the youngster Nodirbek Abdusattorov from Uzbekistan. And well, the US team was the overwhelming favorite to win it all, but they had a rough time in the fourth round. They've had some close calls. They had a win, 2.5, 1.5 win in one of the earlier rounds. But they only made a draw against Uzbekistan. And in this game, Caruana was white, and we had a London system. Pretty topical line in the London, kind of like a modern main line in the London, where white goes here knight b to d2, which is a very topical move these days. Avoiding a line that's considered pretty bad for white, when we go c3 and have to go queen b3 and adjust to c4. And here usually black has been going queen b6, but then d takes c5 is the current way for white to try to get some kind of an edge in these lines. But Abdusattorov takes on d4 and plays bishop f5. Now Fabiano plays bishop b5, and not surprisingly, this is what Stockfish 15 is recommending, and we actually follow the top recommended moves by Stockfish for a while here. c4, so most likely preparation by both players. At this point, d takes c4, a4 to protect the bishop. White will also take on c4 with the knight, gain a tempo on the queen. Bishop d3, cheeky move, stopping white from castling. Now white needs to find a good way. He goes for knight e5, putting pressure on this knight on c6. e6, the best move by black. And now, according to the computers, white should be playing knight d takes c4. And if all goes well, he should get a slight edge, win a pawn, but a position that probably is difficult to win. We're not going to get into it, theory, that's for another video. But Caruana played queen f3, which the computer didn't really like. Putting pressure on c6, we have 3 attackers, so Abdusattorov adds a defender with rook c8, and now Caruana takes on d3, and we have some trades. But the problem with this, after a6, knight c4, and bishop b4, the problem is that we are initiating trades, and when you have an isolated queen's pawn, as Caruana does, and of course he knows this, but the game kind of drifted away from him. And here, if he wants to be able to castle, he has to interpose, which he does. Takes with the queen. Now the black queen has to move, it's under attack. Now the bishop has no square, so he has to take on c6. The queen is attacking g2, so it makes sense for white to protect it. Well, the knight is under attack as well, knight e3, and we have castles. And this position is simply better for black, because white has an isolated queen's pawn. And the rule of thumb is, when you have an isolated pawn, you want to keep pieces on to keep the dynamics. When you're playing against it, like Abdusattorov, you want to take the pieces off to accentuate the weakness of the isolated pawn, which black has managed to do. And actually, a4 is a move that white would certainly like to take back here. He would like this pawn here on a2, because he would have less weaknesses. Let's quickly play around here. Rook d8, attacking the weak pawn. a5, knight d6, this knight goes to b5, a secure square for the knight, and also he's attacking the pawn. And now if white does nothing, black will simply play a move such as queen e4, double the rook somehow, maybe make luft before you do that, play h6. It's very easy for black to improve the position, but white can kind of only sit and wait. But if he does, black will win the pawn on d4 and be a pawn up, a clean pawn. So Caruana tries to go for counterplay. He gives up the pawn, trying to get activity for his pieces, but Abdusattorov stays calm. He plays queen g5. Now, in what follows, Caruana gets a lot of counterplay. He's down the pawn, certainly. But black's king is slightly dodgy, and white has active pieces. He's doubling the rooks here. Well, actually, no, he's doubling the rooks here after rook e1, rook e1. But Abdulsattorov is able to trade off one pair of rooks here. So he's still up a pawn, but again, a lot of play for white. But Abdulsattorov, he stays calm and plays well. But in what follows, black is doing better, but not so much according to the computers. And we're just going to look at the moves. White is trying to remain active, and black is trying to keep control. And white really doesn't go off the trail until somewhere later in the game. Still trying to stay active, and here finally this move the computer didn't like. And Abdulsattorov finds the only good move. Well, white is threatening rook h1, so we must do something, and rook h4 is actually a good move, a winning move. If f takes d3, then the queen can enter with devastating effect. So king takes d3, but now rook h5, an excellent move, hitting the queen. Then we'll trade queens with queen g5. And Abdulsattorov was able to liquidate here. He gave one check and then played rook b5. Rook takes a5 and rook b5 eventually. And 3 connected pass pawn is simply too much. I mean, Caruana can take this pawn, but that will drop this pawn, and that's too much. A few more moves, king e5, the pawn started rolling. Caruana tried to push his only remaining pass pawn, but 3 connected pass pawns, simply too much. And at some stage, black can give up his rook. Rook g8, king h6, f6, rook f2. But yeah, well, this move probably wasn't played because black won. So after rook f2, Caruana assigned. So a very good win by Abdulsattorov. Fortunately for the Americans, they were able to even the score, and 2-2 was the final result. So not too bad, but it shows that the Americans aren't, completely invincible. I'm going to now go on to a tactic which happened in a game between Iceland's board 1 today, Hannes Stefansson, in our match against Nigeria. Now, black played the move rook d8 in a very tough position. This was a Queen's Indian, and actually this position is very tough, and the only move to kind of keep the balance for black is to play knight to c6, which looks bad because we have this move, bishop takes d6, and it looks like we can't capture it because bishop takes f7 wins the queen. But lo and behold, after we capture the queen, black plays rook d8, and it turns out we do not have a good square for this queen. There's only one square that's not attacked by a black piece, and that's e6. But actually the best move is to take on d8 and play with a rook and 2 pawns against the 2 minor pieces. White is still better, but this is, well, black would be happy to get this compared to what he got in the game. If queen here, knight d4, and it's actually black who's better. This threat, we're hitting the rook. It's actually a disaster for white. But he didn't find knight c6, and he played rook d8. So instead, he became a victim to white to move and win. And white has a very nice winning move here, which wins the exchange. And in fact, after the move made, Isaac Okeke from Nigeria simply resigned. His position is basically hopeless after the move, which I hope you found. Bishop g5. Fantastic move. We can't interpose because of the pin. If we move the queen, we lose the rook. And if we take the bishop, we simply take on b7, and we win the exchange because this will drop. Not only will this drop, this will drop as well. So disaster, and yeah, white won. Let's see another nice tactic by Justin Tan. Not the most spectacular, but I thought it was a very nice team. It's white to move. We have even material, but white is completely winning. And I thought this final move was very, very nice. And black obviously resigned after what white played here, which shouldn't take too long for you to find. Justin Tan played knight f5. I just thought all the pins were quite nice. The pawn is pinned to the king, the rook is pinned to the king, and the pawn is pinned because the queen is undefended behind the pawn. So actually the knight can't be captured, so you lose the queen. A nice final move and a nice win by Justin Tan. Now, I don't want to say a funny moment, but the drama of chess sometimes. In my match, the Icelandic women's team today, they were playing against Mozambique. And according to the rating, we should have won easily, but like I said, the African teams seem to be vastly underrated and vastly improved at this Olympiad. I've noticed it on many occasions. The Zambia team for the men, they won against Denmark, and they also had a nice result today. I can't remember against which team, but tomorrow they play against Norway, so they're doing fantastically. But here, with us leading the match 2-1, my player had the black pieces here, and Vanya Wilhed from Mozambique had been playing a pretty good game here. She played queen e6. She's never going to lose, but she's trying to find a way to win. After king f8, it's difficult to win. Probably, I don't know, maybe king e2, trying to run with the king is a way to try it. I'm not sure. We don't really have good checks because this check, king g7, and we can't really take the pawn because the king runs to h6. But what happened in the game, nobody could predict, and it was kind of a sad ending with the clock taking down. White played queen d7, and of course as the captain I was watching, and immediately I could see the horror on White's face as she released the queen, and I simply turned around and walked away, not to give anything away to the players, because that's not what you want to do, but hopefully my player is not going to miss this, and she didn't. And in fact, she kind of became nervous because she felt sorry for her opponent for blowing a nice game at the end like this. Just a momentary loss of, I don't know, muscular coordination. But this hangs maiden won. Just an unbelievable ending, and we won the match. A match that was tight right up until the end. Moving on, Magnus Carlsen. He won a very nice game today. Norway played against Mongolia, but believe it or not, after not winning against the Italians, they lost in fact 3-1. Now Norway played against Mongolia, and well, Magnus can't be happy. He won his game, but Norway only managed a 2-2 draw against Mongolia, which is quite the upset. Magnus had the white pieces. We're going to quickly run through the game. He played knight f3, knight f6, c4, e6, and we transpose to the d4 opening here, knight c3, d5, d4, d4, knight c3, and bishop b4, the so-called Ragosian defense. Magnus goes for this line with bishop g5, castles, and Magnus plays quite solidly here. And after these moves, this is starting to resemble a queen's gambit declined, but one in which black loses a lot of time with his bishop because he moves back to d6 at some point and then to e7. So it looks like black is playing a few tempos down compared to a regular position after rook e8, rook f e1, and bishop e7. This bishop has lost a lot of time. Meanwhile, white is playing more or less normal moves. h3, b6. And Magnus felt probably that this was too weakening. He has a lead in development compared to normal lines, so he felt he should open up the position, and he did with pawn to e4. We have a trade here. Bishop e7 trying to catch up, but knight e5, white is getting very active. Now taking this pawn looks very dangerous. I guess we could just play rook at e1. I'm trying to hit the queen with a discovery in a few moves. The queen doesn't really have a nice square, so black refrained and played knight e6. Magnus took an f6 and played bishop h7 check. Now you have to go to f8 because king h8 would be embarrassing on account of knight takes f7 mate. I actually had this happen one time in a team match where there was a bishop on f8, and when I saw bishop h7 happen on the board next to me, and my teammate with black, I was, oh no, he didn't, because he had to play king h8 and knight takes f7 was mate. Fortunately for the Mongolian, he can play king to f8 here. Magnus played rook 8 d1. Again, it looks risky to take the pawn on d4. I haven't really looked, what happens here, but I suspect something like the queen c4, hitting the knight, hitting the pawn could be dangerous. It could be something more drastic, but black decided to take on e5. D takes e5, hitting the queen. But now the pawns are rolling f4 and f5 is coming. And indeed it came on the next move. And now Magnus is rolling knight d4, hits the queen, but queen f2. We're happy to support the bishop here. And now the white pieces are moving in e6, and this pawn can't be captured because f takes e6 comes with check to the king, and that loses the queen. So the queen has to move, queen c6, bishop e5, rook 8 to d8, queen g3, hitting this guy. I don't think black thought that Magnus blundered, but black wins the exchange here with knight e2, hitting the queen. We have to take it, we take the rook with check. But after king h2, turns out that, well, the threats are overwhelming. A move like f6 we simply take, and then queen g8 and queen f7 mate. If we move the g pawn, we're going to either take on g6 or en passant. It's going to end in disaster. Black tried to run with king e7, but Magnus ended with maximum style points. He played a very nice finishing move, and Svidler gave him extra style points for this move. Let's see if you can find it. What did Magnus play here? Pause and find it, and assuming you came back, Magnus played bishop f6, a very nice move. And in all variations, white is simply winning. Now if you take with a pawn, I'm going to take with check on f7. You can't take back with the king. Let's have a look. Takes with check from the rook here. If you take this, you are going to get mated in two moves. Czechoslovakia and checkmate on g8. And if the king runs, so simply make a new queen by taking on e8. And other options aren't much better. I think king takes, runs into something like queen e5. And again, we're going to take on f7. We're going to make a new queen. And no matter where we run, we make a new queen. And white wins. So a nice win by Magnus, but unfortunately did not bring the desired team result. But I'm going to end with a very nice miniature played by Lela Yavakshvili from Georgia in the women's section against India's number 2 team. And well, before the tournament, I actually picked Ukraine to win the women's section, with Georgia a close second. I think India has a very strong team, but I believe they're slightly out of shape, compared to normal. I don't think Hampi Konero has been playing as much as lately, and Harika is actually 9 months pregnant, so they have a chance, but I believe Ukraine is going to win. We'll see what happens. In this game, the Georgian opens with d4. We have Queen's Indian, g3, bishop a6, hitting the pawn. White plays knight beats d2. The bishop goes back because the natural square is knight g3. So black argues that the knight is now on not the ideal square, so we can lose time like this. Bishop d2, c5, and white plays e4. A pawn sacrifice, which black accepts with knight takes e4. Now what follows is knight e5, hitting this guy. And black tried to be clever here with knight c3, hitting the queen, and if you take the knight, black's going to take on g2. But believe it or not, this is already a position where it's white to move and win. And Lela Yavakshvili, she found the winning maneuver. She played the correct move, queen to h5. Now this removes the attack on the queen and introduces a checkmate threat, which is easily blocked with g6. But turns out after queen h3, we are now hitting this bishop and protecting our bishop. So if this knight runs, it can't run very far, it can go here. Then we take on b7. And if you take on g2, I have this very stupid queen. But stupid is what stupid does, as Forrest said. And here the queen is actually hitting the rook on a8, which is super useful because we're also hitting the knight on c3. And this double attack, black can do nothing about. And in fact, after knight a6 and b takes c3, black resigned. So a cunning opening track by Lela Yaviksvili, and this concludes my fourth round, let's call it medley, from the Olympiad here in Chennai in India. Hope you enjoyed it, and see you in a future video. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.